Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of Innovation Circle, the ETIN live podcast series. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you also very much for your feedback on our first episode, which we had 2 weeks ago. For those of you who joined, thank you so much for your feedback. We're very excited to, continuously work on this format and improve it as we go. So the plan for this live podcast series is to cover various aspects that we are discussing under ETIN. So look at different subtopics, but also different strands of areas that we will go into deeper, but also use it as an opportunity to reflect on the events that we have. So in this occasion, we had the team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies last week. And we're very happy to see many of you here in Geneva. And so part of this event was international policy dialogue on strategic learning, as well as an ETIN side event, which was a workshop on strategic learning. Again, thank you very much for your input, for your feedback. And we're very excited to continue these discussions today on strategic learning. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Mikael, who will be moderating today's session.
Thank you. Yeah, great pleasure to be seeing you all again. What we were thinking about this session, what we were going to do is to, again, like Emanuela said, pick up on a conversation that we had last week at this regarding what we call strategic learning. Basically, the background is the following: that as you all know, we're all struggling with this question of transformative innovation. What is it, etc. And over the last year, we have, with the help of you and members and continuous conversation, tried to frame, let's say, a conversation about the struggles that we all face in terms of working with transformative innovation. And that raises really two questions. First of all, what is transformative innovation? How do we approach it? And the other is obviously how we do it. Over the last year, we did the question, what is it? What is it that adds to our understanding about innovation? Basically, we started this conversation actually on the same event, the so-called ToS-ICP, the Team of Specialists, Innovation and Competitiveness Policies, by raising the first question. What is transformative innovation? How do we perceive of it? And just to sort of summarize and get us back on the track, on that occasion, we kind of agreed that it is innovation that, apart from what we already know in producing products and processes, now is actually going to play into something larger. It is going to create transformative transformation of our societies. So that means that in addition to what it already had, the innovations are going to do something more. It's going to feed into larger behavioral changes, connecting various different innovations, and for that reason, it adds to our understanding of innovation. It's not only about producing technology. It is not only about creating an innovation management process or innovation system, but it's also trying to have the society itself prepared to take on and assimilate and even contribute to further innovations and making these connections. So we call that ecosystem development, for the lack of a better word. Now, that was the first question. In this, there are many ways of thinking, what kind of policies do we need? How do we organize ourselves, et cetera, to incentivize and develop this ecosystem? The other question that comes with this is really, if we're now going to do this, we need actually another ways of working. Because what it tells us is that, on the one hand, we have to innovate much more. We have to, inherent in this, causing these transformations, we have to test many new things. So we have to embrace innovation. And it's not just technological innovation, and that's pretty clear. We have to develop new ways of governance structures and new ways of business models and and what have you. So it's more than the technological side. And this raises the very, very big questions for when we experiment. We also have to have a process of learning that perhaps, or most likely, will look very different. And the question is there, if there is a loop here between experimentation, verification, and learning, that will probably look a little bit different. Also, it's very clear that we're heading towards another objective with these transformations. It's very clear that we want them to be sustainable. Hence, they have a directionality and in terms of being precisely sustainable. So we need to tweak this all in a certain direction, which gives a first indication that this is something more than just a passive learning of sort of, yeah, well, we did this and what happened. But it actually is about putting the whole process of what kind of experimentations, how do we verify this when it's not only technology, and what do we learn from it, and how do we bring it into the system again? That makes it very strategic, and that's why we called it strategic learning. Without just the final phrase of the framing, we also, when we started this said we would make this the theme for the ToS-ICP. It is also clear that as a final challenge, the future that we're stepping into, I think I had on that occasion alluded to going into a dark forest and you just have a map and you start figuring out, yeah, we need a compass. I need a compass to know something. I know the map is old and it's not necessarily relevant. I need to have a direction. There is also a new component into what we see as learning in the traditional sense, when we do something and we kind of evaluate and we can look back at history and say, we're going into the unknown. So what did we do before? What can I bring in? In this case, there's also already kind of a compass here that is a new kind of, let's call it learning, for lack of a better word, that has to do with looking into the future, the forecasting. That becomes another component in this loop of different learning aspects. You learn from the past because you have a map, and you want to go into the compass, or to the future, and you have the forecasting as your compass. And then the question is, when I come to bifurcations, and was it right to go to the left? Or should I have gone to the right? You do the constant evaluation. That was the kind of the process that we discussed on this ToS-ICP, and we had the two workshops for those who weren't there that were kind of discussing the general phenomenon and trying to figure out what this is all about and what makes it different from the learning that we're used to. And also we had lots of interesting examples on how this is done in different environments. That is to say, in the local level, at the national level, and perhaps the international level. So that's where we were at the time. Now, I thought this conversation was so interesting at the time, or we thought, so we said, let's continue here on the live podcast. And we actually, on the spot, recruited two persons that were there, and that was on one hand then Kirsi and Alex, and they introduced themselves later, and we also had Julie supposedly participating, although she has run into problems and sent her regards. Mishaps in the last minute. So that happens, but that's part of the live podcast as well. So if I would turn to the two ladies here that were just a delight to listen to. Kirsi, for those who don't know you, a little bit quick intro, where you are from Finland and you work where and do what? I think you are muted.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yes, here.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, now you hear you. Okay, thank you, Mikael. It was so nice to be there in Geneva. It's so nice to continue the discussion also online. Yeah, I'm Kirsi Hanhisalo, and I'm senior lead, working as senior lead at Sitra in Finnish Innovation Fund in Finland, Helsinki. And our aim in Sitra is to strengthen Finns' ability to change making and solve wicked problems. And at the moment I'm working in Sitra's Futures Laboratory, where we really want to make change makers life real. So we have also training programs for decision makers, but in laboratory we really want to make change with all of us, so anyone can have an access. We have open access programs where anyone can, with their ideas, come to in, and we can support their way to more sustainable future. But so we work in many big teams. At the moment, we have 3 main teams. We have sustainability solutions, we have fair data economy, and then we have democracy and participation. So those are those core teams we are working with. But in our laboratory, we are really thinking how to do that. If our teams, they are thinking what to do, what we need, what teams need to be done more further. But in laboratory, we think about how to do that. And there we have tried to all the time learn how to do this systemic change.
No, that was what I thought was so interesting with your interventions there, and that was really how to do it. And I hope we can land there more. I tried to brush over the kind of conceptual framing here because I really want to get down to the things that you're suggesting. You know, how do we do it? And you already mentioned a couple of important things here. I think, you know, the working with data, and you know, we can dive into what are the implications for AI now when we can deal with data, and also the training. This is about capacitating people and presumably feeding these insights into the system again. So with that said, you know, we placed Kirsi on the map. And then we have Alex. Let's have a quick intro of you as well for people to understand who you are, where you come from, and what we can sort of suck out of you, if you don't mind the expression.
Thank you, Mikael. Great invitation. And yes, it's really nice to be sort of reconnecting with people who were there in Geneva last week in person, and to be able to continue this dialogue online and beyond. So I'm Alex Glennie. I work as Head of Policy Engagement and Learning at the Innovation Growth Lab. So we're a sort of an entity that is based in organisations in both the UK and Spain. I'm in London, and we work with policymakers in the fields of innovation, science, entrepreneurship, and business to help them drive impact through experimentation, evidence, and data. So really about, you know, how do you find ways to rigorously test and develop the programs and policies in this area to understand what's working, what isn't, what should be invested in and scaled up, what should you be stopping doing because it's not a good use of resources. And I think really bringing that sort of scientific experimental approach to an area of policy making that perhaps hasn't had so much of that in the past. Yeah, I can say more about some of the very practical things we do to help governments learn in this area.
We come back to that, but that's an interesting angle as well. You're saying, you know, bringing in kind of the science approaches into the process, which is more saying you're not bringing in the scientific data, but perhaps the scientific approach in the sense of how you learn. So, you know, it's a moving target, perhaps. But if I were to throw out, you know, you were both there. I tried to do this brief framing for those who weren't there to understand what we try to do. If I were to be more specific, I guess we discussed what's transformative, what strategic learning is, and why it is potentially important and how you do it. That was what we had as a general framing for our conversations. If I were to throw out to you then questions now with the weeks of hindsight, just to sort of get us up on the track, what is it that stood out for you, the two of you, most of the conversations that we had? You know, if we start there, what with a week of reflection, what came to you after these exercises? You know, anyone can go first. Alex, go ahead.
Okay. I think one of the main things that sort of stayed with me since the conversations last week is this idea of the purpose of learning and how it's used. I think the word directionality came up a lot in the panel discussions we had, and also the smaller group conversations, and really that idea of what is the learning for. So it's not just learning for its own sake. It's not learning for the purpose of accountability or reporting necessarily. That might be part of it, but it's learning in order to make better decisions and to be able to pivot and adjust course as you're going, rather than just waiting and looking back and saying, this is what happened, what can we learn from it? It's sort of that active learning. I think that's coming back to that point you made about what makes it strategic. It's strategic if it helps you to make better choices in the here and now, and not just reflect on the choices you made in the past.
Yeah, it's learning for development rather than learning for accountability. If we were to sort of juxtapose the two, yeah, good. And you, Kirsi, what came out?
Yeah, I think that the most important conclusion for me was that there is any more like learning caps or things like that, because it is dynamic and emergent. You have to all the time learn. It is like continuous. And I think after this Geneva, that why we don't speak about learning ecosystems, because we talk about ecosystems like separate, but why to make silos between these innovation on learning or leadership or whatever, because they are like included in this whole ecosystem, because it's embedded all over the world, this learning. It is like ubiquitous learning. What is the frame? So that you learn everywhere at all the time. So it is not like separate path or separate formal action, but it's constant, continuous, dynamic, and it resonated a lot for me.
Yes. No, I made a similar reflection like you, and it's so intimately linked to policy in a sense, and perhaps doing, right? It's a continuous process, and it's also about planning for learning. It becomes really a loop. When I learn, I also have to bring that into the planning for the next phase, so to speak. It becomes really a circular process, which is probably very, very strategic. What was it that we didn't talk about then? That you have? Is there anything that has come up in your reflections on what we didn't talk about? So things that sort of yeah. I mean, I'm always slow in myself when I'm attending meeting, and sort of it comes to me afterwards. Sort of I should have mentioned that. Was there anything there that either of you kind of?
I think there were a couple of things for me, maybe that we touched on but didn't really unpack in depth. I think there's something around what kind of culture does it take within organizations or across ecosystems in order to be able to do this kind of learning. I think that came up across a number of the different discussions that we had, that there can be a lot of sort of resistance to learning in this dynamic, continuous way. It's a difficult thing to do. It's a change for organizations that are used to particular models and frameworks and more traditional approaches. So I think something that we didn't quite get into enough, and it would be good to explore more, is how do you create that culture that facilitates this kind of strategic learning? And then the second, more practical, like where are the opportunities to test out this in practice? Because it's very easy to have a sort of a theoretical discussion about it and agree on the need for strategic learning, but where is it currently happening? Where does it need to happen? Where can we try it and see how it goes? And I think that's that's also something that it would be good to pay more attention to.
Yeah, these are kind of interlinked, right? You said on the one hand there are different cultures and different organizations, and where do you test it? I mean, it kind of resonates with one another. If you were to develop a little bit, I mean, I think this is an interesting. If you give some more meat to that, and then Kirsi can mull about her lost themes for a minute or two, because I think this is very relevant, and we can see if this is
So where some of the practical
yeah. So I really like the thing that there are different cultures in organizations. Yeah, could you provide some examples, some sort of own personal experiences perhaps? And you said places where we can experiment on this. How do you, if you were to develop your own reasoning?
Yeah, no, I think looking at maybe some of the ecosystem players that are involved in this learning, or that need to be involved in this learning, and what they're doing, and we had representatives of those organizations in Geneva last week. So whether that's national innovation agencies that are involved in funding and supporting these sort of ecosystemic interventions, or driving sort of transformative innovation policy missions, they are sort of sites where learning can take place. So we've got colleagues on the line from Vinnova, other places like that, where some of this is happening already, where things are being tried and tested, and maybe it hasn't been badged to strategic learning, or maybe it has, and trying to understand from that what has worked so far, what has been learned, was it applied in the strategic way that we're thinking about? If not, why not? What were the barriers for that? And then sort of developing that from real life cases rather than sort of theoretical models. So I think, the kinds of organizations we work with tend to be innovation agencies, ministries that are involved in setting policies, managing programs to support innovation. And I think they can be a very useful site for sort of testing some of this out.
Yeah. And it goes back to a little bit to the question of also, I think, kind of implicit here, who is learning? I mean, who is learning here? That's I remember I saw some studies on that. It was kind of depressing, really. I mean, you have people that come in, and the ones who were learning were actually only the evaluators, because you didn't consider there were people coming in and they were evaluating stuff, and they were then having feedback with the personnel, but it wasn't relevant to the people working. So the only one who was, I mean, I'm simplifying the argument, but it was actually a scientific study on learning, on innovation policies and transformative innovation, actually. So I think it was called Moraz, Lund University, that did that study. And so it also goes back to the question of who is it for, right? And I think it's so that's a really valid point that we should probably we can come back to that as well. And Kirsi, was there anything that you thought was missing, let's put it that way, from the debate that you would have liked to dug into?
Yeah, okay, yeah, I can tell what I'm missing, but I would like to say to Alex's point of view, this culture, the question of culture, because what I miss a lot was we didn't talk about the leadership, because I think that the leadership is a very important fact when we think about learning in organizations, for example, because the culture is, we all together are like making the culture. What motivates people, how engaged they are, what is the trust of the organization between the people, and things like that. It makes a basic ground for the learning, and also sharing the learning and being like very active in learning in workplaces, for example. But what I missed, was this question about leadership, because in complex, because we are now living this time. So what is this complexity leadership? For example, one researcher in States, Mary Ulbeen, has said that at the moment we really need adaptive space for being there, because there are conflicts at the moment, there are difficult stuff at the moment, but still we have to go through them and learn together, and a little bit like conflicting also together. But it doesn't matter if there are some kind of small conflicts, because we have to be active brokers so that we can make the change to the very new systemic vision what we are aiming all to. And then another question was about this artificial intelligence, what I asked also there in Geneva, so that because we have to make very radical innovations at the moment, it's not enough anymore the innovation phases or processes at the moment. We have to make very radical phases, radical innovations, and then at the same time we know that artificial intelligence can support us to make it more effective. So it can help us in two ways, to make radical innovations, but at the same time to make our working very effective, cost effective and resource effective. So how we can utilize at the moment AI beside these processes, how to work together with AI, not like.
But you mean also for the
together.
very learning, for the very learning process, or for something as mainly making work more efficient? Or if I were to sort of push you into the learning, is that you mean that is an unexplored potential also for the learning, the AI is?
Yeah, I think I think because it might be like a new team member in our teams in the future, so that we really have to understand what kind of support is needed and how this AI can help us to make our work. IA, okay, artificial intelligence, how this can help us, support us, because it's like support intelligence more than wise. So that how to work together as a human with this kind of new stuff. And I think that this is very much about question about learning. We have to very quickly learn new ways to work, to make processes, to learn together. And I think if this is the main question in Sitra at the moment, we really have to think about it and what to do with it. So how to work together.
So what you're saying is that the question isn't only about the ways that AI will change our environment and create new opportunities for the change itself, but it's actually how we learn about the change. That's that you also sort of pushing here with AI. We can get access to new data, we can have new ideas that actually can speed up our learning process, but that means that we have to deal with our own learning process in a different way. That's more or less how you resonate here.
Yeah, because I think that we are talking about more and more personalized learning, so self-directed learning or self-regulated learning, so that we really have to we are more responsible for our own learning also in the future, so more than ever. Although we have this formal education system, but still at the same time we have to take very much response on your own learning paths. And for example, young people, they are very active finding out their utilizing social media or artificial intelligence to support their learning in a very personalized way. And
that's
to say that, because universities are more like formulated in silos in faculties, and we have challenges together. We have to make solutions together, like challenge-based learning. So it is the challenge we have together, and then we have very like fast expert teams around these challenges, and each person is like talented and also learn a lot by themselves, beside formal learning also. But I think, for example, in Finland, many people are now very eager to learn in personal space.
This is a really interesting kind of future scanning trend thing that goes into another option. It would be interesting to hear Alex comment on this, because from what I hear, Kirsi is talking about individual learning, and we spent a lot of time, and you have certainly helped me sort out the idea of systemic learning, Alex. So what do you see in building on this AI kind of argument for the systemic learning? Is this something that has implications from there as well?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, I think that's a really useful distinction to raise between the learning that we're all doing as individuals ourselves, the learning we're doing within organizations and sort of groups or silos that we might be in, but then how do we also effectively do collective learning? Because we're trying to, we're talking here about addressing big challenges that cannot be solved by individuals on their own or by sort of single institutions or even single sectors. Sometimes we're talking about the kinds of challenges where you need lots of different players learning together. And that's an altogether sort of different approach, which requires maybe some different sort of structures and ways of doing things, and maybe combining the artificial and the human. We talk about collective intelligence. It's sort of combining these things together and seeing how we can sort of find those synergies between the new tools, the new frameworks, new ways of learning, and the insights we get from ourselves and our organizations.
Yeah, great.
I really have to add to that. Hey, Michael,
sure.
Can I add to that? So that, of course, swarm intelligence is important, but at the same time, we have to understand these personalized needs and these systemic needs, and then make this alignment so that all components are like mission alignment to the same direction, or making joint value or joint impact. And this is a question how to do that so that these individuals and all people in organizations and national level, international level, so that we are making together these joint huge challenges like common, and linking our thinking and really push to the same direction. And this is the question. If this can find the solution for that, it would be nice.
Yeah, and you're adding an interesting aspect. We probably shouldn't dive into that, because I also want to open the floor for the people attending online. But the fact that also where is the border for learning? I mean, you sit we both sit at sort of nationally based research centers. We're sitting in the international level, and these are global transitions. Right, really, or at least regional. So the regional learning is probably also an interesting aspect. And when you have talking about AI and all these other opens up for new opportunities. Could I just round off with a sort of a final question, so that the crowd here can prepare themselves for their possible interventions? And because you mentioned Kirsi, leadership as an important factor, and really when we're talking about this, who's going to lead these processes? Is there anyone here? Do we need new types of leaders? Do we need a sort of a learning entrepreneur? And someone said, I don't know what Julie said, it was she had this wonderful expression at the ToS-ICP, and I forgot it, being the
transition
kind of
brokers.
broker. Yes, thank you, transition broker. Thank you. So leadership. Who's going to lead this? Any can start. Kirsi or Alex, who wants to go first? You have probably thought about it, Kirsi. So about the leadership.
Okay, that's nice to hear that this transition broker, because this Mary Urbin is exactly talking about this broker in this adaptive space. Yeah. So between these silos and systemic, a new way to make things. So there has to be brokers between there. So this kind of things we need at the moment. And I think that in many organizations we have also leader specialists more and more. So they just focus on how to lead and learn in organizations, how to make this culture so that every people can really learn and they lead these learning processes. So they really want to make a leader of the learning systems area. And I think this complexity leadership is needed at the moment so that we share the leadership, so it is not here in hierarchies anymore. But for example, this Burtsok example in Netherlands, was it in Netherlands, so that there are no leaders anymore, but all the workers are like co-leaders or leading together the organizations. But I think it is the most modern way to make that without leaders, but something between that. So some kind of shapes we need, but inside the sandbox there is not so much hierarchy anymore. So how to make this new kind of modern leadership real? It would be nice to hear if you have good examples.
Yeah,
that.
well, Alex, you have a chance to, what do you say on when you listen to this?
Well, it makes me think about something that we maybe touched on briefly last week, but didn't get into again, is sort of who has the power and the influence to implement our learning, to drive it forward. And I'm not necessarily meaning power in the sense of, you know, legal authority or financial power. It could be more sort of, you know, moral authority or, you know, experience-based authority. But there was something around how do we actually drive it forward, and that's an interesting question if we're sort of, you know, seeing more co-leadership of things, co-design, leadership, less leading, you know, who then can take decisions, can drive forward some of the choices that need to be made as a result of the learning, because if you leave it to sort of consensus or the collective, sometimes it doesn't happen. So yeah, I feel like there's a sort of a dynamic that needs to be explored here around, yeah, how do you drive forward that learning and what might inhibit that?
Yeah, because it speaks to also the question of the sources of leadership, right? Is it power? Is it money? Is it some kind of legitimacy, knowledge, you know, the kind of the more social norms basis? And probably it's, you mentioned yourself, culture is probably different in different cultures or different organizations in different settings. And certainly it's an area to be explored. And again, that's probably a podcast in itself. But let's open up. Time flies when you're having fun, and I really wanted our attendees to have a chance to make their own questions. And so, is anyone out there in the cyberspace wanted to have their own reflections on what you're hearing, listening to, and so forth? Oh yeah, Chris. It's not in cyberspace here, but yeah.
I would have just a small comment from experience.
Yes.
I remember working on impact assessments or regulatory impact assessments, which are obviously your kind of assessments before you implement a policy. And I think from around 2007 to 2008, they were quite fixated on having PERPs, which were post-implementation review plans. And these were seen as best practice, but policymakers never wanted to do them because they didn't really want to evaluate. It was supposed to be you would have a data gathering strategy for your post-implementation review. But for me, the whole problem was post-implementation. Like, why are you only reviewing performance after the implementation? So they were a very bureaucratic exercise. And it's very interesting to hear the people speaking, our two speakers really emphasizing the ongoing learning.
Yes.
And then when I next work on regulatory impact assessments by 2016, they stopped calling them evaluations in Ministry of Defence. They stopped calling them evaluations. They called them learning from experience and trying to keep them to just no more than 5 pages, just what went wrong and what could have helped and what went well. But I absolutely agree that you know, in IT they've been talking about agile approaches for a long time, but they've still been relatively unsuccessful in the bureaucracy because the bureaucracy wants a fixed budget and is generally not very agile. But I think AI could be quite a game changer. Actually, the artificial intelligence could really help flag the key indicators. Like you could change the indicators as you go. You could say after 2 months, what new indicators should we look at? And I think this kind of recursive learning or deep learning and things like that, I think could really have applications.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah.
No, but it goes back to sort of I tried to sort of stylize the whole thing. I said there's one thing doing accountability and one thing doing learning for or evaluation for development, because they probably need to be reconfigured or they're totally different in their setup. When you do accountability, you want an external evaluator to provide one example, because otherwise it's not legitimate. I cannot evaluate myself if I spent the money right. But on the other, when you turn it around and say, are we going in the right, am I doing things right, or am I doing the right things? I have to speak to the one who is doing it. And that is probably the continuous thing. Then there has to be stops that deals with accountability, obviously, because it's tax money and it has to do with illicit operations and what have you. But I think it's important to think about what the learning is all about, because it ultimately really comes down to how you organize the very learning process. And I think that's what we're after here. So and it becomes a clash. One is really the sort of the top down, the hierarchical, I have to know that you're spending the money right. But whereas the other is really what do I need in order to be able to perform, and the ones who do it sit on the knowledge.
Yeah.
They should
I think the evaluations need to also take into account the strategic learning within the project. So they evaluate at the end, and if there hasn't been strategic learning, that should be a negative in the evaluation. It should be incorporated, and I don't think it really is. I think that it's very defensive, and it looks at the initial budget and says how was this compared to the initial budget and the initial project document. And this is not like the right, very static way of managing projects, especially things like I said, IT projects where they want to be agile. Like in private sector, they're agile, but public sector especially, I think. But you probably have the same problems in big corporations, though, I think.
No, I think you're saying something. I mean, the word leads the thought, in the sense of, if I'm saying, am I going to be evaluated? That is in itself kind of a provocation, right? If someone is going to measure my performance, did I do right? And there's a right and wrong here, and there's good and bad, and all of that. And that's a challenge. Where instead of having a language where you actually said, how do we improve? Let's listen to your experiences. And I guess that's the other angle of it. And so the leadership and who does that becomes probably important. The language of it all. Yeah. Is there anyone else?
2 hands. We have one from Kjell. He was first, and after that, Lena.
Good. So Kjell, well, let's do the ladies first. I think we start with Lena. You can wait, Kjell.
He was way before me, but it's okay. I can.
I know. He's
I don't have any problem with that.
Yeah. Let's do the ladies first.
No, but I think that was a great comment also about. Of course, if you're being evaluated, you want to show your project in the best possible way. I mean, you show the success, you show everything that went well, and so on. But I figured that in the context where I'm working, where I'm spending a ridiculous amount of time right now thinking about learning and collective learning, is that the most useful information is when someone has done something. If they straight away after doing something, can be just one activity, like knowing what you know now, how would you do it differently next time? I mean, that doesn't say that you didn't do it well the first time, but something you must have learned, and that information is the most important or most valuable to build upon for the next one. Otherwise, you're always a step behind when you see how things were planned, and then you see the result. But you missed that one. What would that person have taken with them to the next time? And when you start getting that into the feedback loop, it gets. I've noticed that it gets becomes a bit more powerful. It's a way to capture the more critical things without criticizing or without admitting that things didn't go well. So I think that this whole, the project finance model doesn't help. When you have your indicators and that's what you're supposed to do, and in 3 years from now you should have, helped 500 companies and created this and that many employments, and then everything you do is to try to justify that you did the right thing. I mean, that is not a model that helps collective learning for sure.
No, that's a good point. Any Kirsi, Alex, you want to comment on that, or you're just in agreement? Any adding to?
I think that the sense making or retros all the time during the learning is very important. So it is like sense making and learning is like embedded in all you are doing. For example, in peer learning sessions or benchmarking sessions, so it is ongoing process. It's a good point.
Exactly. And then you come into the next problem with like, how do you then distribute the things so the right people that are affected and can benefit from that information actually gets access to that information, so it doesn't stay within a consortia or within an organization. That's a whole different topic, of course.
And I think framing that the way Lena's describing it is really helpful as well, because there's a lot of emphasis on learning from failure, and that is not learning from failure, it's learning from experience. It is what information do we have now that we didn't have previously that we can build into what we're going to do next, that is not so hard for people to engage with emotionally as well as practically.
It's a really good point, since I'm the one that always provoking or promoting, I'd say, learning from failure. But you have a really good point there, that it's not necessarily a failure because I didn't have perhaps not even the full information. Second, I didn't have the right criteria to judge it, and that's something that grows with time. So experience is probably much better wording, given that word also lead our thoughts. So thank you for that one. Kjell Håkan, you are waiting for your turn.
Yeah, I will start provoking you.
Yeah, I know. I know you were. I leave you for last.
No, I will just to comment on AI first. I think we were talking about like the climate view presentation, and we were talking about our data overflow or information overflow that we are thrown into when we. Because you collect so much data. I was visiting Volvo when they're looking at self-driving trucks. You get so huge amount of data that as a human you cannot really compile or so. Having AI to really help you make some pattern or some organizational, observational things out of all the data and information we are able to collect nowadays. That's I believe the basic, the first at least kind of support that you can get from AI, which we probably as humans are not capable of doing. But what I wanted to provoke a bit is that we are talking too broadly about learning. It covers everything, and everything is learning, and everyone we have individual and organizational and systemic, and we have learning from ex post, and we have learning from. I think we have to be more precise, because otherwise we are flying very, very high up and we never get to the ground. We started by talking about transformative innovation, and we are not talking even about transformative innovation. We are talking about transformative innovation policy, which is really a small subset of that. And I think we all agreed about, and we have been agreeing that it's theoretically about complex adaptive systems, non-predictable development. The future is not there to be discovered by some foresight. It comes to you one day ahead, and you create it yourself. But you create it in together with a lot of other people, like the termite stack. It's not in the head of each ant. It's the collective kind of behavior of the ants that creates the stack, which is about complexity. So we have to put learning into that kind of context, because we cannot predict. Now, how can we then in some way operate if we cannot predict? Because we are so deeply rooted in this output, outcome, impact plans. I get resources to do something. I promise something. I have to be accountable. I have to ex post learning. we have to go from that and discuss how can we cope with learning in a very specific context where we are non-predictable, where we do experiments, and that's the context. What kind of experiments should we do? How should we design them? In what way? And can we make them such that you can maximize learning out of it? And then, like in the ant society, how can you disseminate it so that we together behave in such a way that we receive some sort of new collective value in the economy or in the society? I think that's where we should have the discussion, and not this very abstract, very broad learning discussions that we have been having now.
Well, that's great. That's the kind of provocation we want. Are we talking about, can we go into transformative innovation policy without defining that would be my rebut here. I mean, I obviously have to rebut a bit. Can we jump into transformative innovation policy when we haven't really discussed what the learning becomes in a transformative innovation process in general? I mean,
no, you have to go into the details. What I was trying to talk about, that this means, since we have this kind of complex adaptive system with non-predictability, that we're really like in the ant society, it's really the behavior among us. Nobody has the future in their head. We have some pieces of what we think will be the future, but we have to correlate ourselves. We are behaving collectively to create the future one day ahead. Now, how can learning make us more effective in creating directionality, which was discussing? We are all agreeing about directionality, but how can our collective behavior create this? Because we create the directionality every hour and every day and every week. And how can learning be put in that kind of context? And I think everybody is agreeing that this requires experimentation. But what is recommended? Even the RCTs has very limitations in many, and there's this generative experimentation, this Darwinian kind of experiments that we are doing every day. For example, when we create a lot of startups which are experiments in their own. So I think we have to put learning and experimentation together, because learning without the context, it's of very little value. It becomes so abstract. It has to put in a very certain context.
No, that's a fair point taken. Kirsi, Alex, you are invited. Do you have any thoughts on what Kjell-Håkan said?
Yeah, thank you. It was a powerful talk.
Well, he's powerful.
I think that in our change programs, what are we doing at the moment? We have combined many things like that you mentioned. For example, we make experiment portfolios so that we have shared impact, and then we have to focus on the networks around experiments. So it's not only the experiments, but the surroundings and networks. And then we learn together cross-sectoral teams, so that we really learn what is a systemic, what is the structures behind the experiments or nearby. And then we have also cross-scientific approach, so that we not only making only strategies foresight, but we are making systemic thinking, design thinking, and then impact mindset scaling together. Different kind of cross-scientific approaches, so that it's not only like foresight is the question for all, but it's like making a map for us. So we have to understand first, then mapping, and then make this how to do that in a real life, and then collect teams or whatever is your method. In our programs, we make an open call, and then around this phenomenon, we have many teams which are making like joint impact map, how to make this change real. But this is our method in certain items we make at the moment, so that we support change making in Finnish society broadly. So we across different sectors and businesses, private, public, and then also geographically across country. We really go to the cities and collect what is going on in certain phenomenon we are trying to change.
Good. Thanks a lot. That was a good example. Alex, do you want to finish off? I mean, we're running sort of towards the hour, and obviously this is a conversation we shall continue. But you get the final word here, Alex.
Oh, lucky me. Well, maybe just to sort of try and boil that down then, and it's about sort of matching the right method to the context. And I would absolutely agree with Hawkins' challenge and not divorcing it from what's actually happening. So I think coming back to what I said at the beginning, it's about sort of applying that scientific method. So it's about surfacing your assumptions about the problem and other people's understanding of that problem, and then finding what are the best tools that you have available to test that. And then how do you capture that learning? So it could be a randomized control trial. It could be something completely different. But having that sort of suite of tools you can use is really important. So I'll leave it there.
Good. No, I think that resonates well, and I think we were into that already in the previous or in at the ToS-ICP when we sort of combining the type of challenge with different kinds of approaches. Now we are slightly late, but I mean now I think we are curious about who these two ladies are, and we have a little bit of a gaming we finalize with a prepared question. And Olivia, I'll leave it to you to actually introduce this part.
Yes, so here is our game segment, just to bring a bit closer our guest speakers to the audience. So we asked Alex and Kirsi to prepare one truth and two lies for you to vote, and they will reveal at the end what is the truth and what is the two lies about their life. So here is the part. Let's maybe start with Kirsi.
I just submitted the poll for Alex.
Okay, so there it's
start with Alex. Then let's start with Alex. Let me pull it up.
Yes.
Here it is. So here are the 3 sentences that Alex sent to us, and please let us know which one do you think is the truth. And we have a poll as well, right?
It's, yep, I launched it.
Coming, yeah.
Launched.
So I co-founded a social enterprise focused on community and belonging. I worked in Japan as a summer intern for the Asian Productivity Organization, and I have a credit on the Internet Movie Database. These are the long
fits this profile?
Exactly.
Yes.
Let's reveal the votes.
I can't launch it.
Oh.
Ah, here we go.
There you go. Yeah.
My Teams is not cooperating.
You can just shout it out, but also I thought the game was 2 truths and a lie. So 2 of those are truthful.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
not functions disappeared.
It's okay. Maybe we can vote just by raising our hands this time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we just indicate in the chat.
Okay, so in that sense, what do you think was the lie? Since Alex provided 2 truths.
yes.
Do we see? Is it the first one? Who votes for the first? Which is a co-founded, co-founded a social enterprise focused on community and belonging.
Yes. Now, those who think, vote, raise your hands.
Well, I vote for that one.
Okay.
Are there any more?
Can you see?
Yeah, I can see no one votes for that one. Okay.
So
The
no
second
one
one
believes that.
is she worked in Japan as a summer intern for the Asian Productivity Organization.
Well, there's
Stephanie, Chris. Okay.
2.
And then the third one, I have a credit on the Internet Movie Database.
Oh, there you go.
Jacob, Lina, yeah, which one did you?
Well, I go for that one as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
the winner is the winner is the last one. Please, Alex, reveal which one.
That is the truth. I have a producer credit for an independent film that a friend of mine made that I helped with. I've never actually been to Japan, so there you go.
So you have that. Well, that resonates. Yeah, Alex has an interesting background in communication, so let me tell you. But we can take that on another occasion or on another meeting. Yes.
Yeah, let's move now to Kirsi, who sent us these three statements. I co-founded a social enterprise focused on community and belonging. My car was stolen on my work trip by 3 gunmen. And before retiring, I will make a total career change and I will become an entrepreneur taking care of the elderly people.
Paul submitted this time.
Paul submitted this time.
Oh my goodness, it worked. Yeah.
So let's vote.
What is the outcome? And the winner is.
And the winner is. Actually, the winner is the first one. I created a business innovation which got 1 million euros.
Now,
Kirsi, you would like to elaborate?
Okay. No, the truth one is the second one. My car was stolen on my work trip by 3 gunmen.
Ooh.
And the other ones are not true. Yeah, I had an entrepreneurship background, but not this kind of ethical reasons. And I'm not going to change my career because I really like my work at the moment. But this car was stolen. Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, good. I think we have concluded. We even surpassed by 3 minutes. So thanks a lot for this follow-up on the meeting. As some of you know, we are making this theme, strategic learning, something of a work theme for ETIN over the next couple of months. Let's say 9 to 12 months. And so this has been very valuable conversation. We will work on the input and we will reach out to each one of you, and we hope to see you engaged over the next year, so to speak. And thank you so much for your input, Kirsi, Alex, and for all of the rest of you attending. And see you in 2 weeks when we will have another podcast that will be moderated by our director for the division, Elisabeth Tück. She will have a guest, Göran Nyström. He's former vice president of Ovako, Swedish steel company. And they are going to talk about how you transform a mature industry. And the case in point is the making fossil-free steel. And this is, I think, will be a very interesting conversation because it has to do with various types of technologies, one being hydrogen, one being biogas coming in. And the discussion is actually, again, how do you scale up these things? How do you create a new industry or transform an existing industry into something new so that it also starts having these spillover effects? So that will be on the 13th at 4 o'clock Central European time. You're all most welcome. And again, thank you so much for participating. Have a good one.
Thank you.